All right. Good morning, everybody. I promise there's no major policy or procedural changes to cover this time. That will probably be coming up at a future AAC meeting. But I'm very happy to announce instead a change in our staff in OUR, specifically within Transfer OUR. At the bequest of the Provost Office and the Transfer Squad Committee, we have added a position that will assist our incoming transfer students through the process from really recruitment and admission through enrollment and into their final academic home. As many of you all know, that has been a missing point in our services to transfer students. So this summer we were green-lighted to provide funding and hiring that position, and I'm happy to announce that with us today is our new hire, Ms. Deborah Conaway, who is accepted and begins that role officially today. So what better way to start your first day on the job than in an AAC meeting. So she will be working closely with a lot of the individuals on this call who work with our transfer populations in your colleges and units. So I just wanted to introduce her virtually. I know I've been speaking with some of you all regarding some meetings that we'll have more directly with her, but at this time, just want to introduce her to the group so that she can see as many faces and names that she'll be working with in the coming weeks and months.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah Conaway. I go by Deborah or Deb, and I'm very looking forward to working with you guys. I'm originally from West Virginia, so it feels good to be back.
All right, thank you, Taylor and Deborah. We really appreciate you joining us today. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and make introductions. We have Amanda DeBastiani, who is all things Navigate, so she's going to be sharing insights regarding Navigate and using Zoom. We also have Morgan Sharpless from the Caruth Center for Psychological and Psychiatric Services. We've also got Barbara Mullinex, who is here to talk to us about tutoring. And we have Tracy Beckley here from the Teaching and Learning Commons from the TLC. And we have Brian Krause from ITS to share technology wisdom with us. Has Julie Thalman joined?
I believe we have Amber.
Amber. Oh, Amber Novotny. Okay, wonderful. Amber, it is so wonderful to have you. And she is here from WVU Online. So these are our prestigious panel members. I do know that we have a PowerPoint presentation, and so we'll go ahead and let Morgan take it away with that. And if you'll give me just a moment, I will get that shared with you all. And Morgan, you just let me know whenever you needed a slide advanced. So
all right,
we'll
perfect.
go to.
Thanks, Jen.
Sure.
All right. Hi, everyone. Like Jennifer said, my name is Morgan Sharpless. I am an interim assistant director of care management and clinical services at the Career Center. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about our services because they've shifted pretty dramatically from where we were last year at this time. So a little bit about what we know and what we have known is that college students' mental health is increasingly impacting their success on campus. And so our demands over the past years have increased greatly. We've been fortunate enough to increase staff. We've been doing more outreach, all sorts of things to get to students. But what we know too is that this pandemic is also directly impacting us as well as the students that we're working with. And so we know students are experiencing more pressure, increased anxiety, increased distress, difficulty navigating, how to be on campus in a virtual way, how to make friends, and how to navigate campus altogether. And so on the next slide, go ahead, you can go to the next one. On the next slide, I wanted to share just a little bit of data about where we are this semester in terms of our services. So I pulled some numbers just for August, the kind of when students started coming back on campus, moving into the residence halls. So for the month of August, we've had 852 overall appointments. We've had 135 scheduled triages, and 230 of those were personal counseling appointments. And since the start of everything, we've had about 29 crisis interventions. So we've been quite busy, and things haven't really slowed down too dramatically for us since transitioning online in the spring as well. One of the big things that we have noticed is that we're seeing more graduate students than we ever have before. So that's something that's new and a little bit different, but also makes a lot of sense because a lot of our graduate students are taking in-person classes, and they have kind of increased demands, whether they have practicums or clinical rotations, teaching, or you name it. So something that's kind of neat I wanted to include is you can see something to the data that we collect is we ask students who referred them to the center. And so we do have 6% of students saying that their faculty member or advisor referred them, which is, I think, always great. We have a lot of students that come from you guys. They might not typically indicate it on our forms, but we know that you guys send them our way, and we really appreciate you guys being that connecting link. So what students are reporting, this is moderate to severe. So this is kind of on the higher end scale of things. The students are reported increased anxiety, increased depressive symptoms, stress, of course, which makes sense, sleep, and concerns related to academic performance. And so these are all things that students reported in their initial triage that clinician deemed moderate to severe. Go ahead, Jen. All right, so the most important thing we wanted to make sure that you guys knew is all about our services. And so we're operating quite differently than we had been before, like I said. We're offering fully telehealth. We do have limited in-person appointments, which I'll talk about in a second for crisis interventions, but everything we're doing is solely telehealth. So we're continuing with our short-term counseling. We're doing individual counseling as well as group counseling. We have a bunch of groups kind of up and starting that we're going to be doing screenings for, and all of that information is posted on our website, and everything is going to be Zoom through telehealth. Same thing with our psychiatry. One thing that did change from yesterday is our assessment. And so some of our clinicians have been doing some in-person assessments for LD, ADHD batteries, but because of the transition yesterday, we're pulling back from that. And so they're not going to be doing any assessments currently in person. So today we're kind of working on kind of re-navigating that a little bit. And so if you have a student that does need LD, ADHD battery, you can still call us. We'll help connect you to providers in the community that would be offering that service. We're doing more outreach than we ever have before. We're doing a lot of discussion groups. I'll talk about some of that in a little bit more detail, but we're zooming into classrooms and introducing ourselves. We're partnering with Adventure West Virginia, so a lot of their programs that you see on that Refresh website, we're also involved in as well. We're also working really closely with student conduct, and so we're actually continuing to see students who are referred through SAP who have alcohol-related infractions. We're also seeing students with COVID-related infractions and helping doing the reflection exercises with them. We're available for faculty and staff, and so if you guys do have students that you're worried about, I know that I've seen a ton of care reports come through from advisors that got emails from students that they were concerned about. So we work closely with the care team, and so if you have students that you are concerned about and you're not quite sure what to do or how to respond to an email, or somebody made a comment, you can always reach out to us. We're doing crisis intervention. I'll kind of talk about that a little bit more in a second. Continuing with case management, something that we do know is that not everybody is appropriate for telehealth. And so we do have quite a few providers in the Morgantown area that are seeing folks in person. And so what we've been doing is, if we feel like a student could benefit from in-person appointments, we're going to continue that case management that we have always done, and getting them connected to a provider that better fits their needs. Something that is really great and really important that you guys are aware of too is that we have a program called My Student Support Program. So WVU Online has been working with us in the spring semester and all summer by making this an option for students who are not in the state of West Virginia. Because if we have students who are out of West Virginia, we as clinicians cannot provide them with any counseling services. So my student support program is a free service for all the out-of-state students that they can access free individual counseling. And so that's something to consider whenever you're referring students to us. If you do have an out-of-state student that you're working with that really could benefit from counseling, still have them call us. We'll connect them to all those services and supports, but we wouldn't be able to provide individual counseling for them just because of the licensing restrictions across state lines. All right, go ahead. All right, so you guys have probably have heard me do these presentations before, and I talk about the drop-in clinic. So the drop-in clinic does not exist. This is the first, last, and only time you will ever hear me say that term ever again this entire semester. We have something that we're calling the crisis clinic. And so this is for students who are experiencing a crisis, and they can call Monday through Friday between 8:15 and 4:45. And so what we're doing is we're offering same-day virtual appointments, and this is where we might be offering some in-person appointments from students who might be experiencing a psychological emergency. We know that there are some situations and instances where telehealth and phone appointments are not appropriate and are not going to be beneficial, and so we have been able to bring a few students in person to have crises appointments with. And so far, things have been working out really well with students calling us and letting us know that they need to speak to a clinician immediately, as well as getting them into the center if they need to come in. Okay, go ahead. So what it's going to look like is if students need an on-site appointment, what we're going to be looking at is if they're a danger to themselves or if they're a danger to somebody else. Maybe if they've experienced a recent death of a loved one, maybe a recent sexual assault, stalking, any kind of other relationship violence. Might be hearing voices or some sort of impaired reality, or they're not able to function due to extreme distress. And so that's this is what we have on our website that kind of outlines, what warrants a crisis. We have students, we've been managing a lot of crises whose students were in the midst of, panic attacks that we've been able to kind of help de-escalate them. We've had quite a few on-site appointments, like students come in already. And so that's just a picture so you guys can see that we do have one of our group rooms that we use as kind of like a socially distanced clinical space that we're able to bring students in and have one-on-one, appointments if needed. We still recommend, emergency room referral, of course, if students, indicated that they ingested any kind of medication or any other type of substance, they're going to need to go to the emergency room first. And so if you have a situation like that, of course, always calling 911 instead of having the student call the career center is going to be most important. Go ahead. All right, so other emergency services, we still have our after hours line available, the 293-4431. You can access us 24/7. If you're calling about a student that you're worried about, and you can just tell our front desk between 8:15 and 4:45 that you need to speak to a clinician, and then they'll get you connected to one of our clinicians that are available. If it's after hours, you'll talk to one of our after hours clinicians, and they'll kind of walk through, whatever process is needed in that moment for, whatever the situation is. We have our crisis text line, which is used pretty heavily by students. And so it's free for folks to access. It's a really great resource and service. I always talk to students about, this is that you don't actually have to pick up the phone and call somebody because sometimes there can be a lot of anxiety related to it. It's as simple as texting. And we have a lot of that data. And I think we've had about 300 or 400 students use the crisis text line, which is pretty substantial if you think about it. As well, another emergency service is Campus Police. And so they're a great resource. Campus Police has been working really closely with us, especially to, getting students here to the center or helping with transports to the emergency room in certain situations. And so they've been a pretty strong partner with us with helping getting students to the center if they're not, here on campus. All right, so this is a slide that I mentioned that we're doing this year that we haven't really been able to do in the past. Something that Zoom and all these virtual meetings and trainings have been able to afford us is the flexibility a little bit with our time, that we don't have to travel downtown to find a place to park and all those things, that we can just kind of hop into classrooms. So we're doing something called Mountaineer Connections. This is the things that you've been seeing that Adventure's been doing. We've been partnering with them where we're able to do kind of more social events and try to engage students and have them meet one another. We're also zooming into classrooms, like I mentioned, and we can talk about our services. We can zoom in for 5 minutes, 20 minutes. If any of you are teaching this semester or interested in this, you can fill out a request online, or you can email Janice. She's one of our staff psychologists, and she's also our outreach coordinator. And so you can just email her at jlshaw@mail.wvu.edu. And so we've been doing a lot of these already this semester. And it's a really great opportunity to remind students, who we are, where we are, how to access us. Because before, we were pretty known that students can just walk into the building and immediately see a clinician. And so they're still able to do that just via telephone and doing it all virtually. So we want to make sure that students know about our resources as much as possible. Go ahead, you can go to the next one. All right, so I put these last couple slides in there based off of some of the survey information that I think that you guys had filled out and requested that you wanted to have more information on. And so this is just kind of the difference between stress versus distress, right? Stress is something that's pretty normal. I would imagine with the announcement this past weekend that we're all probably maybe feeling a little bit of stress. I know I am. I came to the office this morning quite early to kind of re-navigate some things and scheduling things. And so stress is not always negative, right? So from this morning till now, my stress levels have decreased a little bit, right? But the difference between stress versus distress is, if I was experiencing distress, I wouldn't be able to do this presentation today, right? I would be maybe having, some sort of emotional reaction and inability to function, or, impacting, my ability to be able to work, right? So when you think about students that you interact with, and you're seeing students in distress that are telling you that they can't do this because of, XYZ, or that they're significantly, impaired, or because of the level of anxiety that they're experiencing, right? And so that is more of the distress, right? And this is more, I think, what you guys often see a little bit of. We kind of get some of the panic emails, the referrals to the care team, those sorts of pieces. And so I want to just talk a second within the next slide about how to, manage some of this. And so what we know about distress and what we know about our students is that they don't always have the healthiest ways of coping. And so often using alcohol or substances, the number one thing I always hear is like, I just kind of learned to live with it. I kind of just shove it in a box and put it to the side. And then next thing you know, it kind of explodes. And so then that's where things kind of become like on fire. Unhealthy coping, overeating, isolating, avoiding, being overly critical. These are all things our students typically do quite often when they're experiencing any kind of distress, or, they might be experiencing stress, right? And they're not coping in a healthy way, which then gets them to that distress level. And so our goal is to always get students into the center before everything is on fire, before, they get to that stage where, they can't function. And so as advisors, what you guys can do is helping them kind of foster, some of that resiliency, and helping them build, some of the healthier ways to cope and manage with what they're experiencing. You can go to the next slide. So resiliency, I think, is kind of always a buzzword, right? And so when you think about this is, how somebody is able to kind of move forward, right? How is somebody able to kind of grow, and how are they able to adapt? And so as advisors, what are some of the things that you guys can do to help foster resiliency in some of your students who may be contacting you and telling you that they're experiencing this or that, or this is going on? So many of the care reports I've seen recently is, a student kind of emailing in distress, right? And the response back is this very kind, warm, supportive communication that, hey, do you want to schedule a time to talk? I want to help I want to help you through this. I want to help get you connected to resources, which is amazing. And we so appreciate that time that you guys take and how you guys communicate to our students. And so, letting them know that, you're here, right? Letting them know what resources exist, helping them build connections. Because one thing that I know, at least I'm experiencing with the students that I've been meeting with, is that they are really struggling because they don't know what to do with their time, and they're just kind of staying in their rooms for the most part, and they're just not really sure on how to manage things. And so they're not meeting other students, or they're feeling homesick, right? Getting them involved and engaged in things that could really benefit them, socially as well as academically. This is the biggest one, and I think this is one that we often will sometimes forget to do, is asking them what has worked before. So when you felt this overwhelmed before, tell me what's happened. Tell me how you managed through it, right? They've had the tools before and they've done it. Sometimes whenever they're kind of in a heightened state, they're not able to recognize that. And so walking them through it can be really helpful. Go ahead. Okay, so the big piece, I know I mentioned the care team quite a few times, and it really does take a village. Whenever we have students that we're concerned about, we've had quite a few situations this semester already, and how things worked so well is because of communication. Things started with a faculty member being like a student saying something, or engaging in kind of unusual behavior, and a faculty member saying something and then calling us and reporting it, right? And then we work with the student, we work with the care team to get the students the support that they need, whether that's coming into the center or getting them to the hospital. And so it takes a team, it takes all of us. And I think with these really unique situations and circumstances, it is, we're asking that you guys, if you're not sure about what to do, or how to respond to a student, or how to handle a situation, to call us. We're here all day long. We have staff coming into the building every single day. Our phone lines are being managed by the front desk. And so if there are things, please give us a call and we can help manage them and walk you through them. If you're kind of not sure if something is more immediate or urgent, you're not sure if it should come to Caruth or the care team, I always say just call Caruth, because what's going to happen is, if it's a care team situation, I'm going to stay on the phone with you, and I'm actually going to walk you through submitting the care report, and I'm going to tell you all of the information that you need to put in there that is going to be helpful, and kind of walk you through that process. And so again, just a reminder, our after hours care, we're available 24/7 by calling us, as well as that crisis text line. And then some additional information that I don't think often gets put into presentations, but I talked about stress, right? And kind of was joking that my stress levels were really high this morning, and kind of somewhat getting better a little bit. But the Faculty Staff Assistance Program is here for you guys as well. We have a great group of folks that work over there. You have Janie, you have Sandy, you have Jamie, lots of wonderful people, and everybody as faculty and staff, employees and dependents can have access to their services. And so they typically meet with folks for about 3 sessions or so, and then help get you connected to a clinician in the community or other resources that could be helpful. And so they're a great resource. I know they've been doing stress management workshops. They've been doing a lot of other things that they typically hadn't been able to do before. And then I think the last slide, I just wanted to kind of open up with any kind of questions that you guys might have about our services, or anything that you might have in general.
Okay, folks, you're more than welcome to type your questions into the in the chat function. But since I've not heard anybody kind of open up or type anything at this point, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next speaker, Amanda DeBastiani. Amanda is All Things Navigate. So Amanda, I will turn it over to you.
Okay. Hi, guys. Sorry, I don't have my screen on. I've got 4 kids doing virtual school, or whatever, hybrid school. And every time I turn my camera on, I have this like blob behind me of light. So it doesn't really work out so well. So anyway, mine is not going to be nearly as put together as Morgan's. But I think, when Michelle asked me to be part of this, I think she said that there were some questions about the new features that Navigate have for using Zoom and doing virtual appointments. Now, the big thing, one of the questions that I've gotten from a few people is Navigate allowed or able to put a Zoom link? Do they create a Zoom link that automatically gets sent to students? And that is not going to happen. That's not the case. The way it works is when you set up your availability, you include your Zoom link there. And so that's how students will see anything that you have and linking them to the appointment. So honestly, that's really the big question. I feel like by this point, walking through Navigate and kind of how it works is redundant. You guys use it more than anybody else. So I'm just going to open it up to any questions that you have about how it might work or what you might be able to do with it.
Well, and Amanda, this is Tracy. I'm thinking too, this might be a good opportunity for us to talk a little bit about how Zoom can best be utilized for an advising appointment, if that would be a good segue. Maybe we can kind of make it a little more conversational.
Absolutely, Tracy, take it away.
I'm more of a bounce back and forth because I don't have a prepared presentation either. But I mean, I know Amanda, you and I have been working a lot together. I actually think Zoom is a great platform for having advising appointments, but there are some things that I would really recommend that you consider. I have a very active cat who is wanting my lap. But I actually really like setting it up to where I use my personal meeting ID. And not everybody is aware of how to do that. But if you log into your Zoom account and go to your settings, under your profile, you actually have an opportunity to change your personal meeting ID. And what I did is I actually changed mine to be my office phone number. So it becomes a very easy, consistent way for you to be able to utilize that space. But what I would tell you or encourage you to do is to utilize a waiting room with that feature, because what will happen is that people will join early. And if you don't have a waiting room set up, then you have a little difficulty controlling the flow. But I'm just curious, by a show of hands, how many of you knew that you could do that if you used the little reaction key down there? If you guys know where that is, down at the bottom, the little reactions, yay. Okay, so some of you were aware of that, that's good. Some of those little tricks can make your life a lot easier when you go to send things out. A couple other things I would just throw out in terms of looking at what other schools are doing. I would not recommend that you record advising sessions. I actually ran across a couple blogs where people had attempted to do that, and they thought as long as they got the individual's permission to do so up front, that it would be okay. But what the blogs were saying that I read is that it really did stifle some of the conversation. And then if you're really wanting to try to connect with the student and understand what's going on and where they are, it's harder for them to feel comfortable. It is nice to encourage video. It's just from those of you who have shared, it's nice to see a face and be able to take some nonverbal cues into account, but be very mindful that not everybody has a space in which they might feel comfortable sharing their video. So you would also want to give them the option to potentially use a virtual background. So it may be something that if you're not familiar with how to do that, that you could help them walk through that. Another thing that I have found a lot of folks saying, headsets can really help in terms of clarity of communication. I know a lot of folks, you know, I get made fun of a few times. I feel like I'm doing the airport routine, right? But it does sometimes really help in terms of the communication clarity. Another thing that a lot of folks are doing, using the chat feature to have kind of a running log of what you've discussed so that there's a clear takeaway at the end of the session. And I will share with you a link that will show you how to save those if you're not already familiar with that. So I don't want to monopolize things, but I did want to at least share those kind of key elements that I think could help make your Zoom sessions go a little better.
Tracy, I think that's actually very helpful. I know one of the first things that I learned on Zoom actually back in March when I was advising was the ability to download the chat afterwards if need be. Also being able to control the room a little bit more by having a waiting room. And then that way you didn't have multiple students in on the same thing. So you were helping to deal with confidentiality issues and so forth.
And another thing I just thought of, it's really helpful that you have a clear understanding of what to do if you're having trouble with your Zoom session. Because if they can't get in, are they going to email you? Are they going to text you? Are they going to Teams chat you? I mean, however you've established your protocol, that's important, right? Because you want to know what's going to happen if there's a Zoom problem for whatever reason. So be thinking about what is that plan B so that you don't just assume that the student just didn't show up.
Tracy, we do have a question. If you use the chat feature with the meeting room using your ID, is the chat log visible to the next student who joins the room? Could that lead to privacy issues?
I am going to have to check that. To be completely honest, I don't know the answer to that, but I will get it here just momentarily. I didn't recall it being a problem, but I need to check that. Give me just 1 second. Robin, you actually might know that from experience. When you've joined my meeting room later, did you notice if you saw the chat? She may have herself muted. Oh, well, in any case, I will get the answer to that while we're online here.
Robin suggests starting a separate session with the next student.
Yeah, that would be the best, but I'm thinking there could be times, though, if you're running long, that could potentially be an issue. But let me check that. Like I said, I can shoot a quick Teams message over and get an answer for us.
Tracy, I do actually save the chat and then clear it before the next person pops in, so that might be a workaround until you get a better answer.
Yep, let me check right now. I'm going to send a quick note and I will make sure. It's never really been an issue for me, but that's why it's always nice to talk to different audiences. And I will find out.
Okay, let's move on to Barbara Molinix from All Things Tutoring and helping our students with those skills.
Hi, everybody. So I'll give you just kind of a brief overview about what's going on with tutoring, and then we'll do the Q&A. So tutoring is all online this fall. Most folks on campus are doing it via Zoom. We do have a few folks where it's connected to a class that are doing it through the Collaborate Ultra platform. So we have a website that we've sort of joined together to make. It's tutoring.wvu.edu. I think I can throw that in the chat really quickly. And basically it links out to everyone else's website. I haven't checked this morning to make sure everybody has gotten their new schedules up, but most everyone was getting their schedules up last week as they were opening their centers. Some centers were just opening, I think, this week. So basically, you can it links out to everyone who is keeping their stuff up to date, and as well, there's a feature in there where folks are going to be able to sort of we're finalizing it, and it's not up yet, but there is going to be a feature very shortly where a student can, by what they're studying, find, get linked out. So this is your list of places that offer what you're looking for. So if you're looking for Chem 115, it'll ask you a couple of questions, blah, blah, blah. You go through the decision tree and it gives you all of the centers that offer that course. So, you know, nice to help students find what they're looking for. There's a variety of things out there this year. There's virtual drop-in. There's also appointments. B&E still has their SI going. So a lot of opportunities for students. Some of the times are different than they had been in the past. We were trying to coordinate so that we aren't all offering the same subjects at the same time, trying to spread those out a little bit. So for instance, the ARCs have always been 6 to 9:30 for the last several years, but those are this year 5:30 to 8, and then Testwell is taking 7 to 10. So we have spread those things out a little bit, so definitely check out for some updates there. But now there's one place to send students, tutoring.w.edu, without needing to remember a link for 18 different centers. Yes, Janie, that is just for the Morgantown campus. Tutoring.w.edu is the Morgantown campus. Now, as far as I know, when I had last spoken to folks at PSC and Tech, that was earlier this summer, I know they were transitioning to online in the spring. So I do imagine that they will be hosting those tutoring centers this fall as well, but I haven't spoken to them for the fall. Anybody have any questions? 2 Tuesdays each day on campus. Okay, awesome.
Great, thank you. Amber Novotny, representing WVU Online.
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to take a quick minute, and I'm working with Tracy Beckley here with TLC. So I'll take a minute and talk about the online students website, which I can put the link in for you guys here. So students who are enrolled in the fully online majors, we actually do have a list of resources on the online students website to assist those students. And we also have a new learning engagement center with a set of a few coaches that are here to help assist you guys as advisors. So our fully online students, we are able to help direct them to the resources listed on the students website. We're also able to help them with time management and walking them through, you know, how to register and things like that for their classes. So as you guys need assistance, you know, definitely we're here to help with that. And we do get students who call in pretty regularly for some of those resources. So if you have questions or if you need anything, feel free to reach out to us. We do have the mental health for the online students as well. Through Morneau Chappelle, we have tutoring listed on there. So we're able to help with any of those resources that the students may need as they're going through the transition to online, or if they're beginning their classes as online students as well. So feel free to reach out, and I'm going to kick it over to Tracy with the TLC side. If you guys have questions, I'll answer them as they come.
Great, and hopefully you can put up the TLC screen there, if you could share. I don't know, Jen, do you have that link? Okay, I'll put it in there again so that you can have it handy. Okay, Amber, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just waiting for the screen share to pop up and I just hadn't seen it, so I wanted to make sure you could hear me. Okay, well, I put it in the chat. Oh, there it is. Great, thank you. I just wanted to make sure my audio was okay. So this is our main portal of information for predominantly faculty and instructors. That's our primary audience, but there's a lot of information on here that would, I think, be relevant to anyone, especially in terms of the different technology options. If you wouldn't mind navigating up there to the top under resources on the far right, That site that Amber just mentioned is available from here as well, down where it says online student resources. And that really does have a lot of good information to at least get started. If you're looking for additional resources about how to navigate in the online space, there is a module that was created for WVU 191 courses. And I want to give a huge shout out to Rhonda Black and Jen McDonald for all their work in putting that together. Hopefully some of you have already seen the module that I'm talking about, but it has a lot of good information about how to make sure that you're engaging effectively with your students. And the really big thing I would say is communicate, right? I mean, we hear this over and over again, but I think we still have some work to do in that area, frankly. And so we're trying to push that messaging as much as we can to both instructors and to students, because now that we've pivoted, at least for a couple weeks, there's going to be a lot of anxiety, right? There's going to be a lot of, oh, okay, when is that due? Is that really due when I thought it was due? Or should I be doing something different? And there's just a lot of angst. And we saw this in the spring when we pivoted. And we had reports that some students felt as if their instructors had gone AWOL and they didn't know if it was appropriate to reach out or not reach out. Our advice is reach out. I mean, definitely the more you can communicate and make sure that you're on the right page, that's really important. So on our TLC page, if you go to the instructor guidance button, it's over to the right, sorry, the orange button that says instructor guidance, thank you. And if you scroll down through this, there are a lot of resources available to help with different instructional issues, concerns, challenges, whatever word you want to use. A couple of folks had asked about the different technology that is available to help. Obviously, Zoom is a big one. So if you are interested, if you wouldn't mind clicking on that Zoom link, we have a lot of information out there now around security features and just different ways that you can make the experience more engaging for students. So I know, for example, Adventure West Virginia has been really creative in doing some things like even playing Simon Says, which might sound really kind of corny at first, but it is interesting how in the online space you can just lose focus. And so things that you can do to bring the focus back, engaging questions, things where you're really making the other individual be active with you, whether it be polls, whether it be chat questions, whatever you may want to do. Are there any questions about the technology in particular that anybody had? Because there's a lot out here and we could spend the rest of the meeting going through different technology. So I want to make sure I hit on the big ones that are important to you. So I'll just pause for a second and see if anything pops up in the chat.
I actually have a question, Tracy.
Yeah.
My name is Ashley. Of course, now maybe you can see me speaking. My question is more so about now that we're switching to this online format, how do we schedule our meetings or our class times via Zoom without having like multiple meeting IDs?
So you're talking synchronous sessions that you're wanting to have with your students all at the same time, or are you saying you have multiple sessions that you need to have at the same time?
So, and I'm more so thinking like in the realm of if we have, obviously I know this is more so related to advising about Zoom, but if we're using it for our class times, how do we create those individual class times for, let's say we go on 2 weeks from now, to allow all those members or all those people who are in our class to attend for that particular ID, especially for those of us who are teaching multiple classes, instead of having like 4 meeting IDs. We have
Right. No, yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood the question fully. And yes, the chat response is correct. You could set them up as recurring meetings, and you can actually do that through eCampus now. So if you're using an eCampus shell, it's integrated and it automatically has some securities built in to where only people that are in that class can get into those shells. So it's just some added security. So you can do it either through the eCampus, or you can actually schedule them as recurring meetings right from within Zoom. If you do have a need to have two things going on at once, there actually is a way to do that, but I would ask you to put a ticket in with the TLC so we can walk you through that, because it's the settings are a little more complicated to do that.
Okay, thank you so much, Tracy.
Absolutely, and if you struggle with, because it's actually in the settings, but if you have any issues with doing that, if you fill out a request for assistance, we can walk you through that process.
Okay.
It's a great question. And what I'm talking about there, where I say the request for assistance, if you scroll back up for me, please. Let me get this out of the way. And if you go actually back to the main, if you just click on teaching and learning, there we go. I call it the panic button, but where it says request TLC assistance, if you go there, it will ask you to authenticate. And then if you put in your request, we are trying our best to get back to folks within 48 hours. Sometimes it's within a couple hours. It just depends on how fast and furious the tickets are coming in. But that is the best way to get a hold of someone. And we're going to do, I just had a little sidebar chat. We're going to do a little testing on that chat question. The biggest thing I'm concerned about is not even so much the viewing, but the saving, because I got my wheels turning. But what I would recommend, if you close out of your meeting room and come back in, you should be okay, if that makes sense. So if you actually close out the meeting and come back in, rather than just letting somebody else in from the waiting room, then you should clear your chat completely. But we are going to do a little testing to see, because even if you can't see it, you might still be able to see it in a saved chat transcript. So we'll get an official answer back to everybody on that. Okay, so I don't see any other particular technologies being mentioned. One other thing that I did want to share along those communication channels are a couple articles that I found just out there kind of surfing what resources I could find that I thought you might be interested in. This first one is actually an article from back in March, but I still think it holds very true about academic advising amid this situation and what that can look like. And then also there is an article on the human element in online learning, which I thought was particularly interesting, how you can make those online experiences more engaging, because it is hard, right? I mean, when you're talking out into the great void of the webcam, sometimes it's really tough to know, is anybody out there? Is anybody listening, right? I mean, I've been on calls where people are trying to have team meetings and everybody has their video off and they're just talking and everybody's just pausing, waiting, and it creates some awkward moments. So it really is important to think about what can you do, whether it be a question, a poll, something to break up the monotony, because otherwise you just become a talking head. And that's obviously not what we want.
Thank you, Tracy. That's an excellent point. I know I have often felt like I'm the talking head as well.
It's hard.
But I'm also notorious for not showing my video. So I do apologize to anybody who's been on a meeting when they have not seen me actively with video. I don't have a personal office space in my home, so I'm not You know, it looks like a storage unit, a very badly managed and organized storage unit at that, as my background. And unfortunately, the technology that I have does not allow me to do a virtual background unless you see me as a ghost. So you also, I would make that point as well. Depending upon the student's technology, they may not have the ability to do a virtual background
That is true.
in such a way that actually allows you to see them as a person with a nice digital background. Because we found through some testing early on in March that several of us who were on a meeting found that we had some nice ghosts going on rather than those beautiful virtual backgrounds. So I will say that I personally am envious. I have a colleague in the School of Pharmacy who has a lovely beach setting with a virtual palm tree that is actually swaying, and you can see the ocean waves as well. So we do need to keep that in mind as well. Thank you so much, Tracy.
Absolutely.
So moving on and talking things technology, I think this is a good segue to Brian Kraus from Information Technology Services. So Brian, I know you're kind of out there on the, dear God, what do we do? Everything has fallen, the sky is falling, the earth is going to fall into the sun, and so forth. But what sort of guidance would you have to give to us as advisors in terms of, I know some of the technology that we've talked about, but any other technology or some common, perhaps, help tickets that IT gets with regards to some of the technology that we're using?
Sure. Well, I appreciate everybody having me. I'm Brian Kraus again. I'm the Director of Academic Systems, so my specific role in IT is mostly the student-facing systems. The ones that you might be the most familiar with would be Banner and Blackboard and the portal. So I guess one piece of advice that kind of just came up is, as you're showing your video with all those fun backgrounds and things of that nature, keep in mind that takes resources and bandwidth. So if you're on a call with 50 people and everybody has their virtual backgrounds, particularly ones where there's movement in the background, there's a strong likelihood that you're going to start coming out garbled, and you know, connectivity issues are more likely. So for the most part, I keep my video off for that reason. The other reason I keep my video off is when I turn it on, the internet breaks, because apparently I'm too ugly for the internet. So some of the new things, one of the big things we've been doing summer, as mentioned, trying to get everybody from being on-site to off-site. One of our major initiatives that kind of came up suddenly and quickly was moving Blackboard from on-prem to the cloud. We did that in about 8 weeks, so that should be very helpful with the volume of people now using Blackboard. Being in a cloud environment, it allows us to add resources quickly as need arises. So that should definitely improve the stability of Blackboard and collaborate and all the associated pieces. Some of the challenges we're still working on, when you're connecting other software packages into Blackboard, there's things called building blocks. And for every package like that, a building block is required. So despite our best efforts to communicate, we were getting building block requests from faculty and other people that purchase new software, you know, within a week or two of school starting, and we're working hard to try to get all of those in place. Another thing that you may have noticed this summer in July, we went live with the Banner 9 registration module and a new college scheduler version. So Banner 9 is separated into multiple modules for each function. There's registration, financial aid, student accounts, and then faculty. So registration was the first one we went live with. It kind of makes a newer and more modern look for the students. It's also mobile friendly. And the new version of College Scheduler looks almost identical to the previous version. The main new feature of that is when students register and click on the shopping cart, instead of being pushed back into Banner to finish up their registration process, it actually can happen within College Scheduler. So there's one less click basically for students and a little bit less confusion. Another piece that you may have noticed some changes on is the portal. There's now a few sections of it that say that VPN is required. There are many sites and resources for WVU that are not open to the public. And so in order to connect to those, you have to be on a VPN. Just a general security tip, it would be recommended that you use the VPN all day, even if you are not connecting to sites that require it. It does allow you an extra level of protection. If you follow the news or anything like that, there's definitely a cyber attacks because malicious people know that you are at home and don't have the same level of security on your home network as you do on the WVU campus network. So definitely be aware of, phishing and all the different things that you might normally get. And also, like I said, the VPN will offer you an extra layer of protection against things like that. Other than that, can't think of anything general. Let's see. When you're in the office and you're on the WVU network, the VPN will not connect because basically what the VPN does is put you on that network. So when you're on site, you are under the WVU umbrella, so you are safe. So with that, is there any questions that I could answer or anything like that? All right, well, certainly if anybody thinks of any after or has anything that they'd like to learn more about, feel free to drop me a message anytime, and I'm always happy to help out.
Okay, so let's just kind of open it up to questions to all of our panelists. I will tell you, however, that Amanda Bastiani did have to step away. So we can reserve any questions by emailing her directly. But everyone else, feel free to throw in some questions in the chat and we'll be happy to address those.
One thing I did mean to mention earlier that I forgot, we have had some reports of students that seek webcams, especially if there are proctoring requirements for their class, and we also have some faculty and staff even that have had to request them. There was an email that went out from the provost office with the process of how to do that. There is a particular survey form that you have to complete, and those requests are reviewed. Hopefully you all have access to that, but it is not posted for public consumption. It is meant to be given out on an as-needed basis by faculty if they know of a situation that would warrant the webcam to be given out, and those are either available for pickup or they can be mailed to the students if needed. So I did want to just mention that. So if a student you're talking to is frustrated because they can't get the technology they need, say for a test they need to take, they should be encouraged to talk to their faculty member and put that request through.
Tracy, I have a question actually that I'd like to pose and just kind of get your spin on this. I know it's something that we've discussed in the School of Pharmacy amongst our faculty, and that is when you are doing sort of that distance learning and want to make sure that there is student engagement. Right now, our faculty are requiring for all classes that when they are distance classes via Zoom, that they do share their video and have their video on. Do you have any recommendations or thoughts about that?
Well, I do think you have to be careful. As Brian pointed out, network connectivity can be an issue. So I put a note in the chat. I do encourage some video share, even if it's just when you're answering a question, or even in the early stages when you're just making contact with students. And then I tell people, if you need to turn your video off for bandwidth purposes, whatever the case may be, then that is acceptable, but I try to model the good behavior when I can. Or I shouldn't say good behavior, the engaging behavior, we'll call it that. I do think you have to be very careful though with mandating it. And I would really want to be careful when I do that, because I know our legal department has been looking into just the legalities of that situation, and most institutions are not mandating it, because you could have, as I said, household situations that are putting someone in a very uncomfortable position to have to share their video feed. So I think I would highly encourage it. And then I would say, if someone is unable to do that for whatever reason, that there should be a conversation with the instructor. And obviously you don't want to divulge that reason, but it could be for a variety of situations. Are they actually mandating it?
I think mandate is probably too strong of a word. I think it's generally expected, but more than anything, they're really just looking to see that they're signed on, I think, is the part that's the really mandated part.
I mean, I know it's been mandated some in health sciences for proctoring purposes, for sure, because we've used Zoom for proctoring.
Yeah, for proctoring, definitely, although we are trying to do, with our classrooms, we've been able to move all of our classrooms to in such a way that they are socially distanced appropriately. And so in doing so, they are expected, unless there are other accommodations made, to test live in person when there is testing.
Are there any other individuals that are experiencing difficulty with the video share, like knowing when to request it? Are you having trouble getting your advisees to share with you? I'm just curious what you're finding. Or is it too early in the game yet to know?
I'll share my experience from summer new student orientation for our first-time freshmen. For the most part, most of our students did share their video. However, there were, in those instances, and I found that helpful personally, just to be able to pick up on at least the nonverbals of the face and what they were showing. I tend to try to read the nonverbal of the whole body when I have somebody in person, to pick up on, cues for anxiousness or discomfort and things like that. So just focusing kind of on the micro expressions, if you will, of the face, is how that kind of worked out. But, there were some challenges, because we did have some students whose internet was much slower. We had gaps and things like that. And, by all means, what was most important to me is that we were able to really serve the student. So if that meant no video, then no video. Or if we had to do it via phone, then let's do a phone call. And it seemed to work out really, really well. The one thing that I did notice for me, and it was totally my bad, between my advising in March when we first kind of went to this whole working from home thing versus new student orientation, is, as Brian had shared, the whole banner kind of upgrade and the difference with schedule builder and automatically that cart registering them. That was something that I actually picked up as I was having the students share their screen with me, as well as what STAR looks like when they're trying to see their schedule and add or drop classes. It looks totally different. If any of you have not been in since March, I would suggest that you try to take a look at that with someone if you can, because it is different than what we may be used to. if we're trying to guide a student through sort of step by step, where to click, where it's at on the screen, and things like that. It will look different than what it did prior to that upgrade.
Well, and I would encourage you to think about other ways that you can engage, either through the chat tool or, as I said, through the polling. The polling can actually be a lot of fun. At least I thought it was fun. For our TL talk meetings, Amber, you'll have to let me know if you agree, but we always throw out a little trivia question. It's a very low stakes, fun way to get people chatting, and not everybody's able to share the video, but we also just draw from a hat. So I basically was going in, and when I had trouble getting people to share, I just said, okay, well, we're going to draw from the hat and we're going to check in with, and then you actually see the name that comes out of the bucket. And it is putting them on the spot a bit, but if you have a fun question, it's something everybody can answer. So it's really not about getting the answer right. It's just about getting people engaged, getting people to be in the moment, because that's the one thing we keep hearing, and that's what Adventure West Virginia has been really studying and trying to help people with. We're getting distracted so easily because we're just on Zoom all the time. We're online, and so you can very easily, I mean, a lot of people get to where they're multitasking and, you know, they're on their phone, and it's hard. And so anything we can do to bring people back to the moment where we're asking them to give an opinion, or if they know at any given time they could be called on, not that we're going to high pressure them, but just they might be called upon to give an opinion, that it makes them more engaged listeners. And there's a nuance to it, right? We're not all going to law school here. We're not all going to be comfortable with that Socratic method, but there are ways to sprinkle it in a fun way, even, to make sure that people are staying engaged. And I don't mean to get preachy, but it's just one of those things that we're seeing over and over again across all the schools that we talk to. This is an issue, and we're going to have to keep being as creative as possible to address it. So, food for thought.
What other questions do we have for our panelists? And Tracy, I will have to make sure that during our next month's session that we try to put a few polls in there, and learn that feature of Zoom myself. You know.
Oh, and breakouts are good too. Breakouts can be really effective when you have the larger group.
Yeah, the one thing that I will say about breakout rooms that we have also found based on our student feedback is, if you are giving students sort of, if you assign them to small groups, you know, when you're teaching, and you give them, say, something, you know, to work out, you know, in their small group, be real clear kind of about the timeline in terms of how much time you're giving them. We had students who said, you know what, we just got started really talking about the issue, and then the organizer then dumped us all back into the main classroom. So we really didn't get to the crux of the matter that we were discussing in our smaller group. So I would encourage you to, you know, be really clear with your students about that, and the timeline, and precisely when you're going to basically be kicking everybody out of their breakout rooms and back into the main room session, because we did find that was an issue that some of our students, especially when you're relying heavily on group work for certain activities.
Very good point. The more clear you can be, the better the result typically. And you made me think of something. I just put another link into the chat, and it's also available from our main TLC homepage. We had a speaker with us not long ago, and Robin actually was very instrumental in providing this. and I want to make sure that that link, yes. It was actually Derek Bruff from Vanderbilt University's Teaching and Learning Center, or I'm sorry, Center for Teaching. And this was a really good example, I felt, of someone who talked about being very intentional with your technology selections, but he was very clever, I thought, in how he utilized breakout rooms and how we went off and did our work and then came back to the group to share, and how he was able to incorporate some of the different input that he got from the breakout rooms. So if you haven't had a chance to watch that, you may find that very interesting. So I'll put a plug in for that.
And I just want to remind everybody that we are recording this session, but what I will also do is from the chat, I will download all of the websites that all of our panelists have shared. And we will include that in a message that goes out to the AAC listserv that will include both where to find the recording for today's meeting. It's probably going to take us you know, a little while to get that posted and uploaded, but we'll get that out to you as soon as we can, and certainly want to share all of these website URLs with you as well if you haven't had a chance to copy and paste them during our time. I would just kind of open it up now to all of our other experts, all of you who are on this call, and welcome anybody to kind of share sort of your pearls of wisdom, sort of best practices that you have picked up since we've all gone to pandemic living and pandemic working.
Well, I feel like I've been talking a lot, but I do have something on my heart that I feel compelled to share, and I won't share too much of the detail, but I had a conversation with a faculty member very recently that this individual actually ended up in tears over the conversation, and it was because she was feeling incredibly overwhelmed. And she was overwhelmed because in her situation, she was actually trying to have some face-to-face contact with students, but you know, she was trying to hear them. They were talking through a mask. She felt like she was constantly asking people, what? In her online space, she was feeling very fragmented because she was having a really hard time reading for her students. And I think my advice is that we all have to be kind to ourselves right now, and we have to have a lot of grace and extend ourselves and others that grace whenever we can, because a lot of us are learning. And I know a lot of students also feel very overwhelmed right now. In one class, they may be using Collaborate. In another class, they're using Zoom. In another class, they might be using Piazza, right? I mean, they're all over the place, and they're being asked to communicate different ways. And it's hard. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that and not act like we all have it together, because we want to have confidence, yes, but I think it's okay to say, if something isn't working, let's talk about it. And we can make some adjustments as the course goes on. There is an early teaching assessment tool that was just announced that can give some formative feedback that we're really encouraging instructors to consider giving, because it can tell you, you know, what's working well, what isn't working well, what can we try that might work better. And I think now more than ever, we need to be okay with that. And I know myself, I don't really want to be seen as the expert, because I don't know that there is an expert right now. This is new to all of us, right? I mean, we're kind of making this work as we go. So that's what I'm learning, is to be okay with not necessarily having all the answers.
Tracy, I think that's really, really important. I had accidentally muted myself, and the one thing that I wanted to say is that we are all probably feeling very overwhelmed. I think we've been on the steepest learning curve of our lives. in pretty much everything we do, just life in general, as well as, you know, the work that we do. So, you know, I would just encourage you all, you know, to consider. We're going to be having, we'll announce it on the AAC listserv, but we are going to have some sessions that are going to be moderated by Robin Shannon and others from the AAC Executive Council. Robin, do you have a moment to talk a little bit more about what we hope to do with those? Oh, she doesn't have a mic. Okay, so I will do my best to talk about that. What we're hoping, I know that the TLC kind of has these sessions that are sort of drop-in sessions where folks can really, you know, kind of talk through maybe some issues that they're dealing with, kind of get some advice, some peer support and things like that. And so we're still working out exactly what that's going to look like and all of those things. But as soon as we get that kind of determined, we will definitely share that with you. We are all in this together, and we want to be supportive of one another as much as possible as we're all continuing to navigate this sort of new normal that we're in right now. That is, of course, ever changing, which puts additional pressure on all of us too. Kind of getting back to Tracy's point. So just stay tuned with that. Any other questions? Okay, well, not seeing any in the chat or anybody kind of opening up their mic, we'll go ahead and kind of wrap things up. I personally want to thank all of our panelists for your expertise. And Tracy, even though you indicated not being the expert, you know, I know that we do appreciate the wisdom that everybody on the call has been able to share, as well as all of you as our peers in doing what we do. So be on the lookout for next month's workshop. It's going to be on things regarding wellness. Now that is about our own wellness as well as our students. So as we are experiencing this increased time with regards to the stressors in our lives, and certainly the stressors that we have with work, we're going to be you know, learning some things that will help us to help our students during this particularly stressful time for them, as well as being able to help ourselves, as they say, putting our own oxygen masks on first. So with no further ado, I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to join us today. And we look forward to seeing you next month.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.